I thought maybe we could kick off with an introduction by yourself, if you can tell us more about what you've done. Particularly keen on hearing some of these very interesting businesses you've come up with. Should I Wear It and Shakacan? So yeah, maybe a quick intro, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, my background originally, I actually worked previously in finance. So I got ACCA, and my business partner, well, who became my business partner, founded one of the first fashion blogs in the world back in 2007. So that was Style Scrapbook. And yeah, I helped out with things here and there. She obviously, built up that platform, but I was helping out here and there and helped her kind of with some of the more, coming up with business cases on things and working with brands on pitches and things like that. And that ended up, being good timing for that whole industry to really explode. And I think she's, recognized as one of the people that actually helped build up fashion blogging in the early days. So got to the point though where I kind of had to decide between focusing on building up that side of things with her or focusing on my career in finance. And because it was just a really exciting time to be in that space, I decided, let's see what we can make work in this. So ended up leaving the career in finance, worked solely on building that side of things up. But because we were very early on, we also got into Facebook very early. So we were one of the first, if not the first, kind of bloggers at the time to get like 1 million followers on Facebook, etc. And so we also got to see how that whole transition happened with algorithms coming in and how you really had to start to adapt your content away from being, what you wanted to do and more towards what a platform wanted you to be pushing. So, I'm not going to talk down on platforms for doing what they did because they also had to make money. I mean, no one starts a business to help other people solely, right? So as we started to see more of that happening, though, we realized in our minds there was a gap in the market for a platform that was more focused on utility and helping people actually achieve something, removing your areas of online bullying as much as possible and things like that, which, as you can imagine, in fashion is obviously often a problem. So Should I Wear It? It came about because of that. Now, where we were a little unfortunate was the timing.
Is that because of the bullying? Yep. Should I Wear It was to fix
it's not. So it's not just because of the bullying, but I'd say it was more. It was a platform that was designed to allow you to get feedback from real people on what was, should you wear it, shouldn't you wear it?
Yeah.
But remove the judgmental aspect of it so people could feel safer getting opinions. And of course, we had a lot of plans as to how we were going to develop the platform more. So it's not that we've given up 100% on the platform. Unfortunately, though, we were very happy with the progress we were making. We were doing trials with Uniqlo. So if you went into even like the Uniqlo changing rooms in Amsterdam, it had a call to action in all of the mirrors and things like that to use the app. So we were seeing some really cool traction in that sense. Then COVID hit. And unfortunately, with it came all of the stores closing. And essentially, as I can understand from anyone who was, that we were talking with about additional investments at that point, those discussions obviously dropped away as well. So it just became a matter of, would it be possible for us to sustain it realistically? And we couldn't at the time. So it's not that we kind of closed it down and have put it away. But I would say as of right now, we just don't have the resources to continue trying to, get it up and running the way it needs to be done.
It's a shame. I saw the business and I thought it was a great idea. Particularly, this
thank you.
Feedback. It's sort of social proof that we get, as you say, without judgment. And I really love that. But you've gone on to some more exciting stuff. I mean, I was in Amsterdam on a look-see a few months ago. We've been coming through here quite a lot, and I went into one of the bars that your South African bar, Lion's Head, that your brand is listed.
Yeah, it's a great place. Yeah.
And this is where our story began. I was fascinated by it. This was a wonderful innovation. So I've worked in the drinks, food and beverage industry pretty much most of my life. My dad was an entrepreneur. We grew up in the industry. And I've been working as advisor to the likes of the Coca-Colas, the Carlsbergs, the Agios and the big drinks guys for the last 10, 20 years, and also doing my own startups. But when I saw it, I thought, what a brilliant innovation, particularly around solving very specific pain points.
So how do you serve it?
So fill it up with ice.
Yeah.
Put on your little top.
What?
Shake it. And then you just take off the top.
Oh, wow. What an
Cocktail
awesome
in a can.
bartender's
Dream.
innovation.
Yeah. If we're busy, like we make them all by hand if we're quiet. But if you're busy and you get 7 daiquiris, it's like...
And it's easy to make, right? You don't have to train the skills. That's a technology that gives you that edge.
It's genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, where's it from?
It's a guy, it's a South African guy
Right.
who lives in Amsterdam.
Oh, what?
Yeah,
I
it's
love
really
it.
good.
And the name is?
Shakacan.
Shakacan! Dude, this guy deserves an award.
100%.
And a lot of sales. Please, folks, support this man. Awesome.
Shakacan.
Shakacan, and thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
so actually, I mean,
Yeah.
COVID was kind of responsible as well for Shakacan, to be honest. So my brother and I, back in 2017, so my brother was traveling around for a group called Authentic Caribbean Rum, which is a mark, and essentially he was going to various bars around Benelux, I think it was, and just educating people on rum, because especially at the time it was a very misunderstood category. I think it still is to a large extent, but there's certainly a lot more education happening in rum now, and you're seeing rum as a category grow really well, and some amazing brands that are facilitating that. So back in 2017, though, he was consistently getting feedback from people as to how he could get some of these white rums that he was showing them, just showcasing what is possible, especially some of the Jamaican style rums, which we think go perfectly with daiquiris, for example. So bars were asking how they can get it, and you couldn't. So, we didn't have any money really, to be honest, to start a business. But we thought, if we can get in now while there is no real interest in white rum, maybe we can organically get it to a point that by the time rum starts to actually do something, we'll be in a position to, have a brand that we can move with that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did. We just launched William George. It's named after our grandfathers. And it's a very sentimental brand to us in that way. We launched it back in 2017. We just started trying to, ask a lot of friends, to be honest, in the bar scene to try it. They bought it into their bars. We had amazing support from the Dutch bar scene in general. I think when people talk about the Netherlands, everyone kind of gravitates towards, well, what's happening in Amsterdam. But if you look at what's happening now in Rotterdam, Utrecht, The Hague, Groningen, like all of these cities are doing amazing things in the bars. It's not just Amsterdam. And we got amazing support from all over the country. And that allowed us to then get into the UK, where we work with an amazing team out in the UK who, Rumcast, who help us kind of get into various different locations that we wouldn't have thought about trying to get into at the time.
You were saying about your partners in the US? Sorry, the UK.
UK. Yeah, so they had this a platform at the time called Rumcast. I hope I'm getting this right with the timing now. And ended up, we spoke with them for quite a while. They were just amazing guys with good experience and amazing knowledge of rum. Passionate was the key thing with it, though. Yeah. And we ended up kind of working with them to help us get into the UK. And they started what's now a successful company called Skylark Spirits. Getting product into the UK as well. So
are they new, are they? Skylark,
sorry?
Are they fairly new entrants to the market?
I mean, they've been around for a few years now. If I remember off the top of my head, it was probably around 2018 that they launched. But yeah, don't quote me on that. I think it was when they actually launched Skylark. It was around 2018.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so we've been very lucky on, the support we've had from people in the industry. I think they've also recognized a lot of the work that we did to bring a product that was slightly different. It did capture a new aspect of the rum market and really take the focus away from white rum being viewed purely as a very neutral spirit in a lot of categories. And that's, down to the success that some of the brands have had. It's not to talk down in any way on brands that focus on a more neutral white rum. They've just been very, very good at what they do. And they're brilliant at, how to market, how to keep the industry interested in their products. Yeah. And that's something which I hope we can learn from as well. But we did have something which was slightly different, and which allowed them to, in our minds, make the perfect daiquiri. That was a big kicker for us. So we were focusing, because we're a slightly higher price point, we were focusing very much on the bars, restaurants, not really on consumers at all, to be honest, because outside of like your rum nerds who, really want to try new things a lot and are happy to kind of experiment, it's not a product price point that I would say is ready yet for general consumers. We're priced in line with, a good gin or vodka, which makes you think, well, it should be fine then. But if consumers aren't really aware of there being different, aspects to rum, you can't expect them to want to just purchase something for double the price of what the leading brands are.
Yeah.
So that was going really well, to be honest, especially in the UK, we were seeing amazing growth. In the Netherlands, things were going very well. And then COVID hit and we lost, I think it was 99.7% of our revenue in a weekend.
Oh, God.
So it was, a tough pill to swallow. So you can imagine the stress levels between not losing, but being kind of
ceasing trading,
have your legs kicked out from under you on two companies at the same time.
Yeah.
And, we realized, though, that we really needed something with more of a consumer focus. So that's how the thinking started. What we ended up with Shakacan, I would say, is more of an industry solution with something that also works for consumers. So there's definitely the two sides to Shakacan. But it was, a matter of reading an article one day around the full aperture can openings. So I don't know if you're familiar with full aperture can openings, but essentially just the whole top of a can. So if you look at the can, the whole inside here opens up, right, rather than just a hole for being able to drink from. If I remember correctly, I think it was actually created by Saab Miller and Crown for the South Africa World Cup, I think. And the thinking was you open the beer and then you can drink from it as a drinking vessel rather than, pouring it into a cup. So our thinking was, if we think of it as the base of a cocktail shaker, essentially you can enable pre-packaged cocktails that can still be properly shaken, removing waste from pouring, which, if you look at the impact that small amount of waste, if you have a slightly leaky pour spout in a really busy bar, that can cost thousands per year just on every time they're pouring from a pour spout. That's money lost. And, we can save companies a lot of money in those areas. The biggest area, though, and where I think we can hopefully make a massive impact on the industry, not just in Europe, but, I hope globally, is the ability to now have any location that wants to serve cocktails to consumers able to do so. And it'll be a high quality cocktail. We're putting ingredients in there for every cocktail that should be there for that particular cocktail. So you think of, if you're at home and you love making daiquiris, obviously I hope William George rum is the rum of choice that people can go for. But if you're making a Mai Tai, it's not necessarily the right product anymore for a Mai Tai. So, in our Mai Tai, we don't use William George. In our daiquiri, we do use William George. So you're able to now have consumers able to try products on a baseline that is at least consistently good and a good representation of what the cocktail should be. Mai Tai is a great example of that, where, we sometimes get feedback from people saying, well, this isn't a real Mai Tai. And you ask them why. And it's like, well, because there's no pineapple, there's no grenadine. And, so it's interesting seeing how, based on whatever someone has decided to call a Mai Tai on the menu, and okay, that's a different story because there was a version of the Mai Tai famously created, which had the pineapple and grenadine. But regardless of what people decide to call it, there's no rules to say, well, if you have a cafe and you're calling it a Mai Tai, it has to be that way. It's just not a true reflection of what the drink actually is. Yeah. So our hope is that we can also help, bars that want to create something 30 seconds and they can put out a high quality cocktail. They're getting a true representation of what the cocktail should be, true specs, it's properly shaken. And I think that's something which is, of course, a discussion point with a lot of companies that are launching the cocktails from a bottle. Our feeling is that if shaking wasn't important in a cocktail, or stirring, depending on the drink, then your top bars wouldn't bother doing it. Awesome. They don't shake up cocktails for the fun of it. They're doing it because there is a purpose to that. So that's kind of what we see as the biggest opportunity now for us, is just to help democratize cocktails in that sense. We're not trying to turn people away from wanting to make their own drinks. Quite the opposite. I think if you try one of our drinks, it's probably going to get you more interested in wanting to try your own riffs on it at home, or even just try recreate it at home. So we see this very much as something which is there as a product that takes 30 seconds to make, allows anyone anywhere to be able to do it. And I'd say, in my mind, we're really going to help to get more knowledge and understanding of the cocktail industry, and some of the classics especially, that people might actually realize they really do love. And it's not an overly sweet drink that maybe they got somewhere last weekend, or overly sour, or it's going to be properly balanced every time.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, you've said so much that I want to actually pull out.
Yeah, sorry.
No, please carry on. This is exactly what we need. One thing that stood out for me about your brand and product was particularly the element of it removing the need to train your bar staff on how to make the cocktail. And obviously some bars, you've got your traditional proper hotel bars where there's still a properly trained staff member who prides themselves on making cocktails. It's not the market. We're talking about a different market that might have suffered the loss of staff during lockdown, and now sits with a headache of A, they can't get someone behind the counter because they can't get people into the workplace, and B, they need to train that person, and C, potentially also they have the capital costs of getting the equipment to make the cocktails, the shakers, etc. And that you've removed from the value chain. And I think that for me was really impressive, and how you've created value and innovated in that space to solve that problem, firstly for the industry. So that's a big sell for me. I love that. The second part for me was, you've from that, you've reduced the cost to serve because of you don't need to train your staff as much. You don't need to spend so much time on one cocktail.
Waste as well.
The bar's full, wastage, etc. I love what you said about the locations. And so we're now starting to open up the brand. So you're looking at, initially B2B into your audience of bartenders, and as you say, your friendly advocates and evangelists. And from there, potentially ticking off a B2C play. My question here is, how do you see this brand, or how do you see the B2C sort of customer acquisition play out? Do you have funding? Do you have an approach, a strategy? Is there thinking, or is it too early for that, so that consumers can actually go and request this in a supermarket, or can go and buy this or order online? Tell us a bit more about that, please.
Yeah, so I think one thing I'd like to just show is actually how the product is used. Because, for example, like Grapefruit Cosmopolitan, the can, as I said, is a full aperture can, so the whole top comes off. You enter about 3 cubes of ice, sometimes 4 if it's smaller cubes, and that's a key thing to get into a little bit later as well. The top, which is built to last about 100,000 uses, so I'll also get into that a little bit later. It literally just fits on top, twists in place. You shake up your cocktail for, depending on the ice that you've got in, how many blocks, etc., but it's usually 15-20 seconds. You shake up the cocktail, top comes off, there's a strainer built in, so you can strain out your cocktail and ready to be served.
Rumble.
So talking about the consumer side with that, there's 2 kind of roadblocks or bottlenecks that we need to overcome, I would say, before we can truly focus on the consumer side, because I do see the larger opportunity for the company being on the consumer side in the long term. But I'd say in the short term, to achieve that would be more capital intensive than what we realistically are lined up to do within the next couple of years.
Yeah.
So what I do think, though, is that as you start to see something in bars and restaurants, one of the key things that we wanted to learn, especially if you look at Lion's Head, for example, that was, we know the team there, and brilliant bar in Amsterdam. They're not a cocktail focused bar, obviously. They brew their own amazing beers.
Yeah.
So we were interested in hearing what people would think of this if they saw it being made behind the bar. And I think that was a concern that a few of the locations who worked with us early on had, is if people see you making a cocktail and it's from a can, are they going to be upset? And we honestly haven't had a single bit of feedback from any of the locations we work with that's been the case. It's been quite the opposite. There's been intrigue, there's been interest, and especially when people try it, we've had locations say that, people were asking if they could have a freshly made Mai Tai made next to ours to compare the difference.
Wow.
That'd be fun. Now, that isn't possible most of the time because, the solution we're bringing to bars is usually it's bars that don't have bartenders that are there dedicated the entire time to a cocktail menu. So when we want to get more into the consumer side of things, though, we are going to have to overcome that educational step, that people are aware that they need a top to be able to make any of the cocktails. Question we get a lot is, why don't you just make it cheaper and put it in with every pack that people buy? We want to try and avoid single-use plastic as much as we possibly can in our supply chain and our product packaging. As anywhere we can, we're going to try and avoid using single-use plastic. So although our top is made up of plastic, silicon, and metal, it's designed with high quality products and plastics. And as I said, it can last 100,000 uses. So for home use, realistically, unless you're planning on having a large party with a lot of people, you probably only need one. And if you go through it, that's impressive or worrying. So the trick in it for us, though, is going to be how we work with retail on that. I think working with smaller retail is potentially going to be easier because there can be that educational part to it. Otherwise, we're going to need to put a lot of money into online campaigns to educate people, in-store space, which obviously costs a lot of money as well. So that's why our current focus isn't on the consumer side. It's more on the bars, restaurants, hotels, cafes, clubs.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think your strategy is a good one. If I may say, I spoke 2 weeks ago to Andre Menezes. I don't know if you've heard of Tyndall Foods, made by Next Gen Foods, but they typically a Singapore-based, plant-based chicken company. They make sort of lab-grown meat, and they scaling at the moment globally through markets like Amsterdam. They've done very well in Chicago and elsewhere. And I was speaking to them about their strategy, and it's very, very much the same as yours. I guess in the early stages, the first sort of early stage, I mean, they've had some seed funding of 100 million, which helps. But I guess for someone such as...
I wish our seed funding was
could help.
aligned.
But without that, I think the B2B helps you work with other pioneers, agitators, and evangelistas, I like to call it, where they can help you then create that awareness, category lift, as we used to call it, where you can create some awareness and understanding. And as you say, people then start becoming more informed consumers. 20 years ago, people didn't know what a kombucha was. They didn't know what a kefir was. It took time. And I actually personally, I might add that, your B2C strategy could be a very interesting one to start thinking about, particularly around your consumer need states, starting to research some of the flavors, some of the bits, how they interact, how they play with us. And that could also help influence your retailer listings and kind of leapfrogging the B2B guys that you're currently trying to dial up. So that's an interesting play. But I mean, I'd encourage you to have a look at that or listen to the Next Gen chat with Andre Menez. They're a very good business model to study, particularly in what it is you're doing right now. A really interesting one as well. They're doing very well. Plus the 100 million.
I'll look for it.
Yeah. And I love what you've done in terms of how this is probably a South African thing. I mean, South Africa is almost like the equivalent of a war zone for the last 20, 30 years we've grown up in. And so we know everything about adaptability and resilience. And I applaud you, for someone who, I know it was tough for many in lockdown. Many startups failed. Many founders went under, or at least their businesses did. Some lost lives. It was a terrible time. But I think, this is really energizing and inspiring to see how you've pivoted, particularly through those moments, to come up with something as amazing as Shakacan. And what a great story!
Thank you.
Marketing 101. It's a great case study and one that I chat about.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of stress, to be honest. It's been hard, a lot harder than we thought it was going to be, and we weren't expecting it to be easy. But I think especially coming through that whole COVID period, we've never had to worry about patents, for example. So that's one thing. We've patented the process now of turning a can into a single-use cocktail shaker, essentially. So those are all areas which we, had never had to deal with in the past. And yeah, it's a lot more intensive than we were expecting, especially the development process of the Shakacan itself has been really difficult. We're very lucky that we worked with an amazing team out of the Netherlands who helped us through that entire process as well. And then they put us in contact with an amazing team who helped us get our production set up in China. So we were quite lucky on that. But yeah, it's a very capital intensive process getting a product right to be able to launch, because, you think of just cans. Everyone thinks of cans as just being a standard product now, essentially. But depending on what chuck you're using to seal the can will depend on how you need to insulate that to stop any leakage from coming. Now, one way to go would have just been, we're using this chuck, so we'll develop it to work with that chuck. But something which we wanted to also make sure we could achieve with Shakacan is that we don't want to limit this to being something which only we will be utilizing. We want to have this as IP, which other companies can also work with us on, releasing ready-to-shake cocktails. So, you look at the RTD market, we see the RTS ready-to-shake market as being something which has massive potential. And I don't think potential like that can be reached with just one company. Yeah. So we need other companies to get on board, and hopefully some of the bigger players will compete with us in that space for the actual drinks. We just want them to work with us on the way that we go about getting those drinks to consumers and the Shakacan. So that's been a massive learning curve. And then just like supply chain in general was something which was a massive curveball for us. And, my brother mentioned to me the issues with, say, acacia gum, which no one really thinks about very much as an ingredient, but it's in a large amount of mixed drinks. It's a natural product, which majority of it comes from kind of East Africa and northern Central East Africa. So South Sudan, Ethiopia, those countries is where the majority of acacia gum comes from in the world. And it's a natural product which comes from the gum on trees, gets collected, then has to be processed. And the problem, though, is because, there are a lot of issues in those parts of the world. Often a lot of that supply chain is, I need to be careful with my wording on this, is not as ethical maybe as it sometimes could be. So that was one area that we really wanted to try and focus on, as well as anything that we were buying or doing in our supply chain. We wanted to be able to have some form of control and feeling that at least we're not contributing towards worsening people's lives. We're contributing towards helping people and companies. So I was at school weirdly with a girl, amazing girl, Lizzie Lacey, who was working in South Sudan on conflict resolution at the time. And so I reached out to her and said, strange question, but do you happen to know of any way that we can get a supply of acacia gum where we'll know it's from a very ethical source? So she said it was a massive coincidence because this is a discussion that some of the government ministers over there or ambassadors, etc., had been having with her. Is before, she was going to be leaving the country, could she help them think through, how to deal with some of the acacia gum? So that ended up being a really interesting discussion and process, but culminated essentially with, between Lizzie and a team that she was working with in Shakacan becoming what I think is still the only company in the world to legally acquire acacia gum out of South Sudan, going through their official export process.
Wonderful.
So,
wonderful claim to be able to own.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope that for South Sudan, we will be an insignificant drop in the ocean of what they can do with acacia gum as a product for their country. But it was something which we just wanted to, feel that we were contributing towards something and wanting to make sure that whatever we're bringing in, we're comfortable with how that has been sourced. So she did an amazing job. And it was lucky again that, we happened to know someone I went to school with her in South Africa, who was able to help us facilitate that. So it's been a crazy ride. And as I said, a lot of stress, and continues to be stressful. But at the same time, it's been amazing seeing the results and, going into a bar and seeing your product being used and served, and getting a text from one of the bar owners the one night of a tray of espresso martinis going out and telling me that, he only had a student behind the bar that night, but he could still get out cocktails.
Wow. Yeah.
That's been, really rewarding, and hopefully we can continue to grow this.
Yeah, and you're making good waves in a very cluttered space, a very cluttered industry. I mean, tremendously cluttered, and you've cut through, and I have to congratulate you and wish you well. And I hope we can carry on these conversations. I certainly hope when you come back to Amsterdam, we can get together, maybe grab a drink somewhere.
Absolutely.
and chat. But one of the things I want to speak to you about maybe the next time we get together is the packaging and sustainability laws coming into place as of next year. I think that's a big conversation, unless of course you just want to touch on that now, but that's an area of interest for me as well. I'm working with other brewers and packaged good companies in Amsterdam and the Netherlands in general, and we're now starting to grapple with these concepts as how do you scale a brand without a can. What's your thought on that? Just very briefly.
Well, I think first of all, the aluminum is the most recycled.
Are you saying
well in the States they say I say aluminium. But you got to be inclusive. I want to make sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's one of the most, if not the most, recycled material in the world, and consistently reused. So I think if you're looking at it from a sustainability point of view, I think cans is still, for me, the way to go. It's lightweight. You don't have light penetration. So I think it's a greener source, and it is very recyclable. I think it's not a bad thing what European countries are doing, putting these deposits on, things like that, get people to actually take the cans back and just help facilitate that process more. So I don't see it as a negative, what's going on in any way. Of course, there's going to be teething in the beginning. But to me, the big thing in looking at sustainability is how do we try and minimize the amount of cardboard. So that's something which we're consistently looking at now. It's a struggle when you don't have resources, to be honest, to invest into how do you redesign something when you don't have access to a designer who does that? Yeah. So that's, areas where once we get a bit more funding in, we do want to see how we can cut down on paper usage as much as possible. Currently, our big focus is how do we cut down on plastic wherever we can. Things like labels even are, an area that we want to look at a lot more, because we don't have the volumes that you're required to have currently with the large can suppliers to have the cans printed. So there are a lot of areas that we want to continue to, improve as we can. But I do think that with cans, it's the right way to go currently for us. And I don't see it as something which we would aim to switch out for something else currently.
Good. Well, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. I really just wanted to touch on that. And maybe when we meet again, I think there's lots to talk about. There's an exciting time coming up. And I think I might leave it at that. So we've had a great chat. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I've loved it. And I've loved your brand. I love what you're doing. I love the energy. And keep going. Keep going. I look forward to meeting you in Amsterdam.
For sure. And we look forward. We'll have to have you over to our warehouse. You can see the full setup, because we do everything start to finish in-house. So from the canning machine, mixing, batching, everything we do ourselves in-house.
I love that. I'm actually going on a factory tour tomorrow for a circular business that works with Patagonia in
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on a factory.
Amazing brand that. Love them.
Well, lekker, man. I've loved chatting. Be well, and we speak
Likewise.
when you get back. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care.
Bye-bye. Cheers.